People who have reached a 9 or 10 on the pain scale, what happened? Had a KAT scan at 36. They gave me IV contrast fluid. Told me I might feel like I had to pee, no big deal, make sure to hold still. Put me in the machine. Within a minute, I started feeling warm. As they started the scan, I started breathing heavily. Then I started screaming. It felt like my entire body was on fire, every nerve. They were confused and freaked out. Got me out and sitting up, but it wasn't until a nurse gave me a shot of Benadryl that I started feeling better. Turns out I had a full-body internal allergic reaction to the contrast media, which contained iodine. Never happened before. Worst feeling of my life. I could not handle IV potassium. The nurse told me she was going to push it very slowly and with a lot of saline, and it still felt like my entire arm was on fire, and the fire was spreading. So she flushed with pure saline, then started pushing the potassium slower and with more saline. Still had me screaming. Finally, after about 15 minutes of pushing the meds at the slowest pace possible, she asked if I would rather take a pill instead. So she shows up with the pill, big-ass pill. When staring it at and wondering how successful rescuing a choking patient would be at the height of COVID with bare staff. So I decided to break it apart, tossed half in my mouth, and I couldn't get it past my throat. Took a few panicked moments before I finally forced it down. I start working up the courage to choke on the next piece, and the nurse walks back in and tells me I can just dissolve it in the water and drink it. Edit, guys, I probably got mixed up. Settle down. She was for sure pushing saline to dilute the potassium drip, not the potassium itself. And that's not even the relevant part. The point is it hurt like hell, way past what I would consider a good time to be made aware that I could also just take a pill. Had tubes in my ears as a kid. When I was 6, our new family doctor told me that the tubes had fallen out, and that I could shower/bathe it without my earplugs from then on. Mom was skeptical, so she just washed my hair in the sink that night, just to make sure everything was okay. Everything was not okay. I woke up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder because it felt like someone had stabbed me in the head with 1,000 knives, then set them on fire. Mom rushed me to the hospital, where I had to have emergency surgery to remove the tubes that were very much still in my ears. Thanks to Dr. Dipshit, I had gotten water behind my eardrums, which had rapidly become severely infected. Thank God my mom has always been one to err on the side of caution and didn't let me have a full shower or a bath that night, or it could have potentially killed me. Severe infections near the brain aren't ideal. I'm 34 now and I still remember that pain vividly. I have thankfully been exceedingly lucky in not gravely injuring myself. However, the most egregious amount of pain I've ever been in was getting stung by a stingray. Wasn't paying attention and moving quickly through a shallow ocean and felt a slice. I thought I'd step on glass, but by the time I got out of the water, the pain was so intense I couldn't even think. Felt like someone put my foot in a blender. I got treated quickly and thankfully did not go through the peak of it. For future reference, submerge affected area in the hottest water you can stand without burning yourself. Ovarian cyst burst. Yeah, that was a red flag moment in my brain. I deal with a lot of pain, endometriosis here, but I knew something was absolutely not right the second that happened. My stomach bloated so fast and so quickly because of the internal bleeding that I looked pregnant within a minute. Not even kidding. My husband was with me and witnessed it all and looked horrified. He's an EMT, so I was a bit disturbed when I saw his face. It was like 1 a.m. and I was so used to being treated so poorly by doctors I didn't want to go. Also, I literally couldn't even move. I had to pee and it took every ounce of will I had in me to even move. My husband offered to move me himself. Was bloated like that for probably close to a week before it was back down. It hurt to cough, it hurt to laugh, etc. Also, the shitty nurse assumed I was drug-seeking. When I showed up to the ER after urgent care sent me there 20 hours later, when I forced myself to go to the doctor because I was faint. She blew my veins trying to get an IV, and then I was made to do an internal ultrasound, in which I cried silently, and the tech actually stopped and told the doc they wouldn't continue. Finally, the my/cat, the one with iodine, revealed it, and the nurse was clearly embarrassed when they told me something was indeed wrong. Yeah, no shit. I can't move without my body feeling like it was struck by lightning or I've been impaled. Dude, it was a bad experience. It's a bit validating to see so many people saying how bad it actually hurts. Mine was in the process of rupturing, that or infected. I had been running a fever, nausea, and vomiting, bleeding through multiple tampons an hour, the worst cramps I've ever had, and would get pains that made me almost pass out for over a week. I had stage 4 endometriosis. It turned out my reproductive organs were covered in necrosis. I had a 7 cm cyst that was covering one ovary, the one causing the flu-like symptoms, and a cluster of small cysts hiding between my other ovary and intestines. Sometimes when I would go to the bathroom, the cysts that were between my ovary and intestine, when they were inflamed or aggravated, would get squeezed by my bowels moving. I would turn ghost white, my ears would ring, my chest would start pounding all the way up to my ears. It felt like a red-hot poker was stabbing my abdomen. I would get super nauseous, I became very faint and dizzy, and sometimes I almost passed out. I may even have once or twice. I also used to have cluster headaches for about 2 decades, and I can verify that ovarian cysts can absolutely be just as painful as cluster headaches. I would say both qualifies at 11/10 on the pain scale. It felt like I was going to die. Tried to give birth vaginally, and after hours of labor and hours of pushing, something felt horribly wrong. Then it felt like the worst pain imaginable. Ended up having an emergency section, but something went wrong with the drugs and I could feel the incision. My uterus had literally burst. After closing, the doctor was checking to make sure my uterus was solid, and it had multiple other tears. I almost blew it out. The doctor cried, telling my boyfriend what had happened. Trigeminal neuralgia. It feels like every bone and tooth in my face has been crushed and shattered. I've had high pain tolerance from a lifetime of nerve damage from scoliosis, but TN pain had me truly wishing for the relief of death. Absolutely nothing gave me any relief whatsoever, and I was begging to just be sedated. Fractured my hip and had to keep rucking 12 miles with 65 olds on my back. I bawled my eyes out the whole time, and another person was lifting the back of my ruck up to help take the weight off. But it is still the most painful thing I've ever experienced. Note: I wasn't allowed to leave the ruck or drop the weight. My DS said I wouldn't get credit for the ruck, and would be recycled if I didn't carry my ruck. Note: IA. My company was still using the large Mole Elite IA rucks with both side pouches. Rheumatoid arthritis. My knees had been so inflamed that I wasn't able to bend them for about a year. Had to learn to use the toilet standing up, even number 2. Anyway, one day I started to stumble, and I caught myself by automatically bending my knee to stabilize and not fall. It was like a gunshot. I passed out and woke up in a puddle of vomit. No idea how long I was out. Thankfully, I was on carpet and didn't hit my head in the way down. I've had 2 children and I've passed 3 large kidney stones. This pain was beyond all that, but it didn't linger. Worst I ever felt by far, but only for seconds. Having my nipples sliced into with a scalpel with no anesthetic, and having the doc manually drain a 7 cm abscess under it. It had been left too long to drain with the needle method, as the gunk was too viscous, and I had already been on the strongest tablet antibiotic for 2 months, which hadn't done a thing. This was the last step before surgery, as it was so close to rupturing on its own, and I was in so much pain while dealing with all the normal infection signs like a fever, shivers, nausea, shakes, dizziness, etc. They tried to use a local anesthetic jag directly at the abscess, but it just caused me so much pain before the actual painful part had even started. It never took, as my skin was too inflamed. The abscess had forced all the nerves to the surface of my breast/nipple skin. The pain was truly another level of intense. An intense, spiky burning like no heat you've ever felt. The doc had to press down her entire body weight onto my breast/nipple, while squeezing each side like a spot, for almost 10 minutes, which might not sound long, but it was an eternity. I had to be held down by 3 nurses as my body was just reacting to the pain by trying to move to relive it somehow. Sweating, hyperventilating, vibrating, not even shaking. They eventually had to pause for a bit as my heart rate was so high. I found out when I had came out of the pain haze that most people pass out, and because I didn't, they were super worried I would go into actual medical shock, but thankfully I was okay after about 20 minutes of lying down with a fan and water. I've had a first trimester missed miscarriage without any pain relief, and I would personally rather go through that than have an abscess under my nipple manually drained again. Gout attack. I am in my 20s and female. By all accounts, it's not supposed to happen in my demographic. But my dad has it, and apparently genes outweigh all that. I kid you not, I woke up one morning and would have sworn to you I had broken my foot. It hurt so bad, and if I tried to stand, it felt like it would just break worse over the next few hours. It got to the point I couldn't stand or put any sort of pressure on it at all. Shoes wouldn't fit. Couldn't even stand trying to put them on that foot. Anything so much as a sheet brushing on my skin was pure agony. The best part was my mom telling me not to be dramatic and cry when I went to walk and nearly fell. Migraines are close behind because it always gets to bad at puke. I have chronic migraines, and over the years a few have sent me to the hospital to make sure it wasn't actually a stroke or aneurysm or something else. They always say worst headache of your life is a warning sign and all, so it gets dicey sometimes. The worst one I've ever had was in January of 2019, 3 a.m. during a blizzard. Pain bad enough that I dragged myself out of bed under those conditions, managed to clear my car of snow, and drove to the hospital down the street. I don't know what I would have done if it was a long drive, because even those 3 minutes were incredibly dangerous. The pain scale is so hard to use because, yes, this was the worst pain I'd ever felt. I thought it must surely be an actual major brain bleed this time. Like a thick rubber band wrapped around my head and squeezing my brain. I gave a 10 when asked for my pain level. I know that there are surely things in life that hurt worse, but I truly couldn't, and still can't, imagine what that kind of pain has to feel like. I was close to passing out. Folks who don't have migraines often don't understand how truly fucking excruciating and disabling they are. I believe I've reached 99% pain threshold with 100% being passed out, but I didn't pass out. I had hemorrhoid removal. For 2 weeks I was crying all day. My mom's friend is a nurse. She came every evening to give me a shot in the butt to allow for a few hours of relief. Rest of the day I was lying on my belly in bed. For 2 to 3 weeks my hole was basically closed, so I didn't need to not have to go poop. Every time I had to fart, I couldn't, so it turned out into a cry of pain. Worst was about 5 days after, I really had to poop, but I couldn't obviously, so I was screaming on the toilet to my father, "Kill me, I can't take it anymore." Worst 2 to 3 weeks of my life. Just to compare, my aunt had this surgery 2 years before me. She told me it's a pain at the same scale as childbirth, but lasts for 2 weeks. This surgery changed my whole perspective on pain, as before that I was scared asteriskless from needles and pain in general. After this, I had a half-sleeve tattoo done covering my entire forearm, because I knew this pain wouldn't even compare to what I have been through. Moral of the story: hemorrhoids are no joke. At the first time treated early, because I didn't, and my situation turned so bad in a span of 3 years that I had to do the last resort operation. Hydrocephalus. The liquor everyone has in their brain couldn't leave the skull because the path that's usually taken is blocked in my brain. To alleviate that, I got a shunt placed when I was just 3 months old. It connects the ventricles in my brain with an area in my abdomen where the fluid gets absorbed. When that stops working for whatever reason, the fluid builds up in the brain and causes serious headaches. I give them 12 to 13 on the scale. And the brain assumes it's being poisoned and orders the stomach to be emptied immediately. It repeats that about every 45 minutes to an hour. The only way out of that condition is to get into a hospital where I need a surgical replacement of the failed shunt. A short-term solution is to get cortisol, which somehow brings the pressure down a bit so the headaches and vomitation don't continue. No, that's no fun. Last time I had it happen was 2008, but it could happen basically any time. Autoimmune attack. I woke up with a few canker sores in my mouth. It slowly progressed throughout the day until I had over 125 sores lining my gums, roof of my mouth, on and under my tongue. It was so bad I couldn't eat or drink without immense blinding pain. The doctors didn't understand what was happening to me, so they told me to use medicated mouthwash. It was like pouring hellfire into my mouth for just seconds of relief. It took 2 weeks to subside, and it still tops my pain scale despite a horrendous ankle surgery, burst ovarian cysts, and an Achilles tear. There is another scale that, thank God, is not very well known. It's called the KIP scale. A 10 on the regular scale is about a 6 on the KIP scale. It was invented for cluster headaches. You can get to a 10 on the KIP scale with cluster headaches. It really sucks. When it's over, you just kind of lay there. You can't even think. These are rare. Only about 1 in 10,000 will ever have an episode. If you want me to just look at you and politely nod, compare it to your migraines. The level of pain has been compared by a doctor to getting your leg cut off with a chainsaw. These can last 3 hours, and you can have multiple a day. I was getting 2 at the same times every day for a month. I'm not even the same person after that. I lit both of my hands on fire with isopropyl alcohol while cleaning my dab rig. It took me too long to get to the sink and put them out, and I was dripping fire all over my furniture. Both hands had third-degree burns and I couldn't use them for weeks. When the pain was at its worst, I started to get euphoria waves in which I almost passed out. It was almost pleasant, if not for the horrific pain. Herniated discs in my lower back. It's happened before, and after a day or so of rest, it was sore, but I was able to get around. The last time it happened, I tried to sleep off the pain again, only to wake up several hours later still unable to move. Called 911, ended up with 3 fentanyl injections that did nothing, and had to be carried down 3 flights of stairs by firefighters they called in to help. Spent the night in the ER still unable to move. It's been about 6 months, and I am finally able to slightly bend over without feeling like my back is going to give out again. Still sore every day, especially when I take a long walk or do some physical activity. That's a pain I would never wish on anyone. Herniated discs in my lower back. It's happened before, and after a day or so of rest, it was sore, but I was able to get around. The last time it happened, I tried to sleep off the pain again, only to wake up several hours later still unable to move. Called 911, ended up with 3 fentanyl injections that did nothing, and had to be carried down 3 flights of stairs by firefighters they called in to help. Spent the night in the ER still unable to move. It's been about 6 months, and I am finally able to slightly bend over without feeling like my back is going to give out again. Still sore every day, especially when I take a long walk or do some physical activity. That's a pain I would never wish on anyone. Contractions from an induced labor. After taking the pills to start induction, contractions started within an hour. I didn't think they would get progressively worse within minutes. So I didn't ask for the epidural, nor was I vocal about it happening. For the record, with my first daughter, the contractions weren't that bad before getting the epidural. Well, these came on quick and fast and were hitting every minute with no breaks in between. I had the worst pain ever in my colon every time one hit. I felt like my colon was going to burst on top of these contractions that pushed the breath out of me. I had no choice other than to scream at the top of my lungs while gripping the side of the bed. I was like that for at least 3 or 4 hours. It was so bad I had a hard time sitting still for the epidural. That needed a second dose, but the first did nothing. Worst experience ever. Also on this list, nerve damage after a dental procedure. If I was to ever be suicidal in my life, it would have been then. Nearly a year of non-stop pain in every tooth on the right side of my mouth. I couldn't chew at all and lost so much weight. I was down to 115 kg, and I'm tall. Nothing but skin and bone. It felt like the fronts of my teeth had been shaved off, and ice and cold air were going into them all day long with no relief at all. No medication touched it. I just felt like I was having a constant panic attack all day every day. Every single tooth on that side, even if it had a root canal done. Literally maddening pain. Went bouldering and fell 13 feet. No harness, and I wasn't trained right on how to land. Landed on my ankle, heard a snap, and felt immediate pain looking at my ankle being stuck bent at an angle. Adrenaline kicked in, so that wasn't the worst part or pain. Doctor said before surgery he needed to push my ankle back into place. Offered me anesthesia or just an IV, but I would be awake for it. Stupidly, I chose the IV because I don't like being put under. So that doctor and 2 other doctors come in and tell me to count to 3. Then they physically pushed my meanwhile broken ankle back into place. I screamed so loud afterwards I felt bad for the other patients in the room with me. By far the worst pain I've ever felt. 10 tenths pain. The worst of it was when I got the math wrong purifying water with bleach on a backpacking trip. Way too much bleach. I should probably add that a guy with us was allergic to iodine, and this was provided by an MD as an alternative. A close second was when I was getting a lumbar puncture and the ER doctor ignored me telling him that I've got abnormally narrow intervertebral spacing. It took him 8 tries and a whole lot of grinding around on my spine with that big-ass needle before he gave up with it. Had that happen at least 5 times. Same ER. Guess what? It wasn't viral meningitis, it was migraines. Those were both solid 9s. The absolute worst, by far of all, is this weird nerve reaction I get when I sunburn. It's not pain, it's an absolutely awful itching that will not stop, like you got poison ivy under your skin. That one, the same ER, refused to do anything until a specialist got there, and ended up calling security after I was on my way out the door to the parking lot. "Where are you going?" There's a gun in my car. Dying is better than this is. Turns out the third option was enough morphine that I passed out in a psych exam many hours later when I woke back up. They never did have an answer about what that actually was. That wants a 10. That was whatever. I would seriously rather be dead, and I'm on my way to make that happen. Ranks as pain I can deal with. That itching, Jesus fuck, that was something else entirely. Bacterial meningitis. Don't remember much from it as I was basically dead, but I had a spinal tap and bro, that was the most painful shit. Not the actual needle, though that hurt like a bitch from what I remember. But the worst was in the nighttime, few hours after it. I woke up screaming like I was literally being murdered. Had shooting excruciating pain all the way from the top of my neck/spine to my toes. Couldn't move or anything. Nurses were like, that's normal after it. No, it was not normal for it to be that bad. The strongest of meds they had in the hospital weren't even touching the pain. Most of them thought I was exaggerating, had scans in the morning after sobbing in agony all night. Turns out they fucked up the spinal tap. It got better, but those few days were hell. I was literally begging this one nurse to let me die. She was the only one who listened to me the whole way through. I still have pain to this day 4 years on because of it. That will never go away, but it's manageable for the most part now. I swear anyone who says meningitis is like the flu, and it's not that bad, yes, I've had those comments, can get fucked. Not to mention I was medically deceased at one point during all this and had to be brought back to life. Wouldn't wish meningitis on my worst enemy. Gallbladder death. I went vegan for a year and stayed away from all forms of junk food. But one night, I was craving a single potato chip since I hadn't had one in a year, and I was at a friend's house. Wrong move. Pain started to slowly build up over the course of 10 minutes, and it was just long enough for myself to realize I needed to call my mom to take me to an emergency room, to avoid the cost of an ambulance. I called her, and by the time she got to me 20 minutes later, I was gasping for breath, feeling pain as if some sadistic person were stabbing me over and over. I couldn't stand, walk, or talk. Just gasped for breath and held on for dear life as I lay curled up on the sidewalk until she arrived. Then I held on for dear life as she took me to the emergency room. I had no control over myself as my whole world was consumed by pain and not being able to breathe. The hospital staff put me on oxygen and a morphine drip, and I lay on the hospital bed thinking I was going to die. It took 30 minutes for the morphine to fully kick in and start draining the pain away, and I remained on a morphine drip, fluid drip, and heart rate monitor for the next 6 hours before I was cleared to leave. I felt weak after and felt like I had been hit and drugged behind by a car. It was absolutely terrifying. The next day, I underwent some tests and confirmed my gallbladder was actively dying, but the soonest non-emergency surgery date wouldn't be for 3 more months. It was at that point I was informed I could not eat anything other than white rice for the next 3 months.